Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it's just past midnight, Friday, August the 16th, 2024. This is the news for Thursday, August the 15th, day 905 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And here come the folks. Hey, Judy. Hey, Joey the Lips. Hey, F and Hell, Eli. Evening, Steve Kennedy, Sam Smith, Trash Hunter. Hey, Pugga Mahone, PH. Judy is here. Hello, hello, hello. Hey, Renee Herman. Hey, Cheyenne. Hey, Bobby. Hey, Eli. Hey, Alex. Anthony. No, I didn't see Trump's speech. I try to avoid him speaking as much as possible. I did finally hear the Musk interview. I don't know what was going on there. Evening, Chris. Hey, Hobo. Hey, Rob Walker. Hey, Clay, long time no see. Awesome. Go to the beach. Go to the beach more. Everybody should spend more time at the beach. I will never fault anybody for that. Hey, Bjorn. The Nordic countries are arriving. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for the shares. So, ladies and gentlemen, and other non-binary folks, how do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv. And we have a kind of special evening because I don't generally have guests on the program because of bandwidth issues that we've had here in Kyiv, but we're going to give it a try. And we'll be joined a little bit later on after the news by Dr. David Hayes. Dave Hayes, there he is. We hope so, Dave. All right, we'll give it a shot. Hey, Dave Frazier. Hey, Jessica. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start off with the Kursk invasion, or the invasion of Russia by the Ukrainians. The first thing that I'll mention is that, in fact, the British military has confirmed today that there are Challenger 2s in use on Russian territory. So for anybody that has heard scuttlebutt, the British MOD confirmed that today. Where are you going in the Poconos, Deathcore Dad? One of the worst jobs I ever had was selling timeshare for Shawnee on the Delaware in the 80s. It's funny because it's true. This is my favorite story out of the Kursk invasion. Just listen to this shit. Oh, dude, I've been to that Great Wolf Lodge. It's awesome. You'll love it. Dig this. Now, you guys know the Ukrainians all speak Russian, right? I don't think I've met a Ukrainian that doesn't speak Russian. And they speak it like native speakers, maybe with a regional flair or accent, but they speak it like native speakers. So when that is the fifth fucking air raid since yesterday. Since last night when we were on the live and the air raid siren started going off. This is the fifth fucking air raid since last night. Anyway. Dig this. Here's what the Ukrainians did when they got into Kursk. They get on the phone and they start calling the locals, pretending to be local officials and telling everybody to evacuate. Well, wait, not everybody. Just the people whose path of evacuation would clog the roads that the Russian reserves were coming in on. How fucking brilliant is that? And that's one of the reasons that the Russian response has been so delayed, is simply put, they choked to the roads with the refugees, and that slowed the Russian army down. Simple, brilliant, smart. There is some confusion, right? We're suffering this fog of war. What is clear is that the largest single capture of enemy POWs by the Ukrainians happened in the Sudza area. They captured 102 Russian soldiers, Russian and Chechen soldiers. And these guys are supposed to be of the 488th Motorized Rifle Regiment, or of the Akhmat Brigades, right? Biggest single day, single event prisoner captured. However, we're getting reports, it's like you're hearing the same report, only they're saying that these folks were in the 144th. So we don't know yet whether there were two separate record-breaking POW captures today or just the one. There's a little bit of confusion there. The Ukrainians are claiming now that they have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 prisoners of war taken just from this Kursk invasion. Between 2,000 and 3,000. And these are not Russian regulars. These are kids. These are conscripts. These are the kids, many of them, are the kids that were doing their mandatory military service right after the war, right after high school, rather. And that's why they were in Russia rather than in Ukraine. Their families are panicking, and there is no system in place inside the Russian Federation to connect the families with the POWs. Consequently, NGOs and others are being swamped with desperate requests by families to understand where their children are. Now, this prisoner capture, this huge volume of Russians going into Ukrainian captivity, is not only stretching the Ukrainian logistics and their ability to deal with them, but it is also prompted the Russian Federation to initiate talks for a prisoner exchange, for prisoner swaps. And so one of the stated goals of this mission was to enrich the exchange bank, right? Was to have somebody on hand that they could trade to get their own people back. That's exactly what Zelensky said 2 days ago. And it looks like that's happening, and it's being initiated by the Russians. Now, I heard my first rumor of the Freedom of Russia legions being involved in this action today. But that's all it is. It's just a rumor. I have no evidence that any of the Freedom of Russia legions are in Kursk. And I wondered about that. I wondered why that might be. And I did have a funny thought. And I'm not sure, right? Like, I'm speculating. I want to be clear. I'm just speculating. Maybe the reason that they're not on the front where they have been in every other incursion into Russia is because they're recruiting. They're in the back. They're talking to these kids. They're helping to process these kids coming out of Russia. Now, I don't know that, but I don't think that that's impossible, or something like it is possible. We just don't know. But I will keep my ear to the ground. According to the Ukrainians, according to General Alexander Syrsky, today the Ukrainians are in charge of 82 settlements, up from 74 yesterday. They are in charge of 1,150 square kilometers. So marginal advances in the last 24 hours, and we should probably expect those advances to slow as more and more Russian reserves get into place and as the Russians get their shit together, which will happen sooner or later, right? Russian media is telling the Russian people that these aren't Ukrainians that have invaded. They are telling them that they are French and German and British and American, that NATO has invaded Russia. Because, of course, the Ukrainians can't possibly be capable of such a thing. They don't have independent thought. They don't have independence of movement. They are merely the puppets whose strings are being pulled by the West. Such unbelievable bullshit. But the Russian government has been lying to its own people for so long about the basic realities of the geopolitical crisis that they don't know what else to do. They can't very well say that the Ukrainians aren't out of men when they've been telling everybody that the trenches are manned by pregnant women and children. Where did these 17,000 men with big guns suddenly come from? And so Russian media is just lying to the Russian people, of course. Although we are seeing cracks in that. I was watching Solyov, and somebody was speaking truth to power on that show, talking about how the Russian MOD needs to stop lying to the people and tell the truth about how bad things are. And I thought that was quite a departure. That was quite a departure for Russian TV. So we'll see where that goes. Russia has shut down the rail, the commercial rail from Belarus. So right now, Russia is using the trains to move large numbers of reserves into the area. And so they've shut down all of the commercial train traffic coming in from Belarus. Any normal trading that's going on, those cars are sitting in Minsk. The Russians are running ads, help wanted ads for trench diggers. Now, this is very interesting to me. Not the trench digger part. Like, that's pretty typical. They're paying nothing. You get transportation to work, clothes, tools, and 3 meals a day, and round-the-clock work for rubles an hour. Anyway, what's really interesting to me is we saw some satellite pictures today of the trench network that's being dug and where it's being dug. Now, the first thing to note is that it's 30 kilometers back from just about the farthest we've seen any Ukrainian groupings of any size. It's 30 kilometers back. So it's probably not a forward defensive position. It's probably intended to be a fallback position, right? The reserves will come in, they'll engage the Ukrainians, and then if they don't do well, they can fall back to these trenches. Now, it's hard to tell because they're satellite images, right? But I would encourage everybody to take a good look at those images and tell me what you think. Are they digging tank traps? Are we looking at tank traps? Are we looking at tank traps and trenches? Because what I couldn't help noticing, even though I am a complete amateur, I am not an expert, I do know that trenches are supposed to be dug in a zigzag pattern so that I can't see you 50 yards away and shoot you with my rifle if I get in your trench. The trenches that are being dug in Kursk appear to be fucking straight line, straight as an arrow. Now, maybe it's just that the satellite image is too low quality to see the zigzags. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe they're doing it wrong because they're in a hurry. I don't know the answer to that. Now, when we think about, remember, we've spent a lot of time on this channel talking about the reasons, the goals that Ukraine might have in executing such a mission. What have we seen? What are some of the benefits that Ukraine has clearly accrued by taking this audacious move? Clearly, they flipped the script. It's no longer a plotting nightmare of attritional warfare where the Russians are slowly making gains regardless of the cost, chewing away slowly at what is Ukrainian land and sovereignty. Script is completely flipped. For the Western allies and partners of Ukraine, we're all on our feet cheering, right? Wow. It's forcing us to reassess just what the Ukrainians are capable of. And everybody who follows this channel knows that I have been screaming from the top of my lungs that we've been underestimating the Ukrainians for years, and we need to stop it and trust our allies, particularly with the execution of Storm Shadows and ATACMS. Although there's something interesting on the horizon with that. So we know that Ukraine has derived a great morale boost. Ukraine is splashed back on the front page of every newspaper that matters. It's back in the headlines. It's back in the news. We know that it's been bad for Russia, that Russia is disorganized, that they look weak, that their borders are porous, and that, frankly, anybody, anywhere that's got a border with Russia knows today they can walk across it. Huge win for Ukraine. One of the outcomes for this, pushing the Russians back, is you get a little buffer zone so that it's harder for them to fire into Ukraine and harass your border communities. And that's been the case. The number of glide bombs that we've seen drop, not just in Sumy, but all up and down the front line, has been, yeehaw, David, has been greatly reduced because the Russians now are flying these sorties against their own communities. And we're seeing them drop glide bombs on Russia. So this minimizes glide bombs in other parts of the front. It relieves the pressure on so much of the front line because we now have reports that reserves from Kharkiv, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, Crimea, Murmansk, and Kaliningrad have all been pulled to go to Kursk. That's gonna limit the pressure on the front line, and that's good for the Ukrainians. They need a break. We know that this embarrasses Putin and creates dilemmas for him that he is clearly not up to, given the sloppy and slow response to this crisis. But of course, it's important to remember that Russia is a behemoth. It is slow to respond. It's got its own gravity. But when it responds with all the force of 500 years of empire. This forces conversations inside of Russia among average Russians about what's really going on and how bad things are. And we've seen some level of panic, certainly in Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk. They've cut the ground lines of communication. It is much harder now for the Volchansk front or the Luhansk front to get the shit they need to prosecute this war. And it's going to get harder yet again. Clearly, they've accumulated POWs for swaps. And then one of the questions that I had was, could this be a dry run for a major offensive to take Crimea? Could the Ukrainians have considered that this could be a low-risk operation on a porous border? If they just put enough manpower behind it, they could cross the border, do everything that we've seen them do, and then just get the fuck out before it becomes too dangerous for them. And have all of this live fire experience accumulated for the real push in the South. Just a thought. The ISW has warned of Russian false flags. We are reminded that Putin began his career, was swept into office with the blood of other Russians on his hands, the apartment bombings. Remember, Putin and the FSB, or rather, I should say, There is a ton of overwhelming evidence to indicate that Putin and the FSB conspired to blow up apartment blocks in Moscow, blame it on the Chechens, and start the Second Chechen War, which was also the way that Putin got elected in the first place, or a big factor in that. His hands, from the beginning of his presidency, are drenched in the blood of Russians. He does not give a fuck about the average Russian person. The ISW is saying that we need to watch out because the Russians may be planning the unthinkable. Atrocities against their own people to blame on the Ukrainians in order to whip up support internally for the war. Kyiv, for its part, is delivering food and water to the Russians who couldn't evacuate. Ryazan sugar, that's the one. Kyiv denies any involvement in the Nord Stream attack and points the finger at Moscow. Now, we don't know that to be true, but that is Kyiv's position. The evidence in the Nord Stream case, from what the Germans have presented, is pretty strong that it was likely a Ukrainian who rented the yacht, Ukrainian diver who went down and placed the explosives, that it was a Ukrainian plot. Now, the Germans insist that Zelensky signed off on it, and it may be. But it certainly puts Germany in a tough spot, doesn't it? Clearly, an attack like this is something that could potentially trigger Article 5. They're a NATO member. It is certainly enough to elicit a response from Germany itself. But it's Ukraine, and they're funneling billions of dollars worth of equipment to Ukraine every year. And they are just about the biggest supporter of Ukraine after the United States from a sheer dollar perspective. So it's an awfully tough situation. And again, for its part, Kyiv is denying any involvement in that plot and pointing the finger back at Moscow. Russian sources report the crash of a Tu-22 bomber way the fuck out in Irkutsk. So that's way out east. That's like, I don't know, 8 time zones from Moscow, something like that. Irkutsk. For those of you who play Risk, you might recognize that. This leaves Russia with 26. Russia is down to 26 working backfire bombers, baby. It's unbelievable. That's down from, if I'm not mistaken, they had 63. Not at the start of the full-scale invasion, but made originally. And at the start of the full-scale invasion, maybe 40 were still in operation, something like that. So they're down to 26. I was flabbergasted by this. We've been hearing reports of inflation in Russia. And, of course, that was a big deal last summer when it started to really kick off. But I haven't been following it closely. So if you guys remember last summer or last fall, the Russians were all up in arms because eggs were going for 100 rubles for 10. Because here in Europe, they don't sell eggs by the dozen. They sell them in packs of 10. It is the most annoying fucking thing in the world for an American, let me tell you. Anyway, that and the absence of bacon, that you can't find bacon here. Very difficult to find anything like American bacon. Eggs in Russia are up to an average of 228 rubles for a 10-pack of large eggs. That's more than double a year ago. And inflation has officially hit 9.1%, though Hankey's, the inflation calculator at Johns Hopkins University, puts that number closer to 23%. So things are tough in Russia. And a lot of that has to do with the labor shortage. Russia's in a demographic crisis. They don't have the manpower. And then, of course, the war is sucking it away or drove it out of the country to flee for its own, flee for your own sake. That labor shortage has resulted in higher incomes. People have to pay more because there aren't as many people to hire. Those higher incomes contribute to higher product costs. Those higher product costs drive inflation, which is driving the labor shortage, which is driving higher wages, which is driving higher costs, which is driving inflation. It's a vicious wage spiral that we're seeing. A bunch of Russian military bloggers released video today of a Russian Ka-52 alligator destroying a convoy of Ukrainian APCs, mostly APCs, and maybe some towed howitzers. One problem, it turns out the convoy wasn't Ukrainian, it was Russian. And so this is yet another friendly fire incident where a Ka-52 alligator takes out a Russian convoy, a convoy of their own. And that's going to be a problem. It's going to continue to be a problem because you've got all these disparate elements in there. You've got the Russian regulars. You've got the FSB. You've got mercenary groups. You've got the conscripts. You've got the Chechens, the Akhmat brigades, as well as Africa Corps, the former Wagner. There's nobody in charge. Every one of these organizations has their own reporting scheme. I don't have a casualty figure for that, Van. It wasn't like the other convoy. It wasn't a convoy of trucks. It wasn't a convoy of military trucks that were filled with reservists. I'm not sure what was hit. I'd have to take a look. But I don't know what the casualties were. On the subject of Germany, there is a new German aid package just announced for delivery within the year, so by the 1st of 2025. 2 Iris-M air defense batteries, plus 4 Iris-T launchers. MK556 rifles, a field hospital. I love these German portable MASH units. They are really something, boy. Amazing technology. And just box it right up, throw it on the back of a truck, and it goes. 30 Leopard 1As, 400 armored military vehicles, UAVs and anti-drone systems, plus 16 self-propelled guns, plus another unknown number of self-propelled guns of the RCH 155 millimeter type. 10 Gepard anti-aircraft systems. So a comprehensive package of air defense and field artillery coming from the Germans before the end of the year. Ukraine has been spotted using a T-90M in the Russian invasion. Now, the T-90M is just about Russia's best tank. Some of the latest and greatest, newest adaptations in it. Ukraine has captured, we believe, 5 since the start of the full-scale invasion, and some of these were captured by an AFP photographer in Sumy and are apparently now in Russia as part of the invasion. So they're sending them home to mama, baby. I wonder what kind of reception they're going to get. The U.S. is assessing Ukrainian airframes for use of JSAMs. These are joint air-to-surface standoff missiles with a 370-kilometer range. If we're looking for a solution to if we're looking for a military solution to the political problem of the ATACMS, which is we've already said you can't use these in Russia, but that's what we need to hit the airfields that are killing us. Well, here's something else that might do the job. It appears to be what's going on here. So the U.S. might be willing to give Ukraine these JSAMs. They will then be able to use them from the F-16s and not use the ATACMS, which the U.S. has said you can't use. So everybody saves face, and the Ukrainians still get to blow up the Russian Air Force. That seems to be what might be going on. I'm not sure. In my opinion, they should just be able to use the fucking ATACMS the way they want. Now, in regard to air cover for these ground forces, we're getting reports that the Ukrainians are running Su-27s, if I'm not mistaken. It's Su-27s are what's covering the skies right now. There has been no reports of F-16s at the front. Ksenia Karolina, that's the ballerina from LA, whose family is from Russia. She's a dual citizen. She was sentenced to 12 years of hard labor in a penal gulag because she donated $51 to a Ukrainian charity when she was home in LA. And when she went back to Russia to visit grandma, the Russians found out about it and took her as a hostage and sentenced her to 12 years in prison for that hard labor in a gulag. 12 years. Russia at the UN called out the Allies for silence on the Kursk invasion. Can you imagine the balls of these people? That there is such a deep psychopathy, a victim-blaming mentality of the Russian aggressor state that I think they say these things without any sense of the irony or the hypocrisy of them. And so Russia went to the UN and said, hey, why is everybody keeping silent about these atrocities that Ukraine is committing on us, poor Russians? I was very happy that everybody at the UN told them to fuck right off and said that they weren't going to sit there and listen to the aggressor nation blaming the victim. Everybody was very clear. And that is the kind of dose of reality that the Russians need desperately, if we're going to come to some final conclusion on this thing. I want to end tonight with some thoughts that I had on the Russian response and where we're at and how everybody is. The Russian response has been piecemeal and ineffective. There has been, what have we seen from Putin? We have seen no declaration of war, no declaration of martial law, no general mobilization. He's labeled the operations in Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod as counterterrorism, so he doesn't have to put the military in charge. He can put his political friend in charge. And what his political friend really seems to be in charge of is not so much the defense of Russia, but rather figuring out which generals are to blame and should be hung for this. That seems to be the real mission for this guy, is to prepare the report of who to purge. Because how this one person is going to take control of these disparate elements is unclear. Especially with Ukraine making a great big communications black hole over the region of conflict. Slowly, it appears that the Russian state is mobilizing, not because of Putin, but despite him. Russia and Putin are battered and bruised, make no mistake. They are not defeated. Putin and Russia are under pressure. but they are not about to break. There may be cracks appearing. Any dictatorship appears strong until the moment that it collapses, and only then is the underlying brittle nature of the society revealed. I do not believe that they are about to break. They are a vast country with vast resources. But they are neither endless nor eternal. All empires fall. And if the West can find the will to commit to Ukraine winning, we could finally see the sun set on the Russian Empire and the dawn of liberty and an era of democracy rise up over Central Asia from the ashes of this great behemoth. Okay. Oh, I forgot I have questions for Dave. So, a couple of things. I want to thank Ballerina. Ballerina? Yes, Ballerina is the sponsor of tonight's live. No, it's not Ballerina, it's Dave Hayes. I'm so sorry, Dave. Dave is the sponsor of tonight's live. That does not have anything to do with the fact that I'm going to invite him on here. We were just talking afterwards, and it came up, and we're going to give it a go. I want to thank the moderator team, the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk: Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, John Williams, Jay, and Travis. I want to thank Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group over on the Book of Faces. I want to thank Vanetta Larrett, who has our Google Doc share, where you can get letters to the Congress and the White House on things like a no-fly zone west of the Dnipro, or the unrestricted use of ATACMS for Ukraine. I want to thank Lars, who has the Discord server and the Alexievich archive. Thank you, Lars. Dave, you want to send me a request to join? And we'll try to bring up Dr. David Hayes here. Dr. Hayes is an assistant professor at Troy University in Alabama. Specialist in, oh, there we go. Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Right, you're a specialist in international relationships, relations, and you have a background as a field artillery specialist in the United States Army, if I'm not mistaken, Dave.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Holy crap, it's working.
It's working so far, pal.
So far. Yes, I was a field artillery officer way back in the before times. When I was young, and yes.
Right on, pal.
And I want to say, Peter, first of all, for everybody who joins you, I think I'm going to speak for, I think, a lot of people. We really appreciate what you did. Also, we appreciate how open you are to people and how friendly you are. And I know that a lot of people are nodding their head. And so I just wanted to say that was one reason I wanted to talk to you, is thank you for everything you do.
Well, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate it. Of course, now, if you guys don't follow Dave, you ought to. He's got, dude, what do you call it? You have a terrible name for your channel. I'm sorry. What is it again?
Dr. Dave Hayes.
No, you have another thing about politics, boring AF or something.
I have a different channel that I created, Boring AF Politics. That's not the channel that, no, I put my actual frickin' name out there like an idiot. I post on my own freaking, you ask me why I don't have stitches allowed. It's like, well, I don't know. I do have a job at a state university, which, by the way, my views do not reflect necessarily reflect the views of Troy University in any possible way. Let's get that out of the way.
Right on. But I find your commentary to always be thoughtful and insightful. And it helps my understanding of things, that's for sure. So, Doc, let me ask you a question. Where are we at here, would you say, in this war? And what do we think the outlook is? And how does Kursk change that all?
I think the outlook is highly indeterminate at this point because we're waiting to see the U.S. election. I don't think that's changed. I often talk about big facts, right? They're just big facts that influence things. That's one of them. I think that this is a very good development. It's a very deft move on Ukraine's part. I think massive strategic surprise because we still don't even know what they're fricking doing. But people are like, what's their end game? Lawrence Freeman, who writes about this, talks about strategy. And he said, sometimes you don't have an end game. You just try to move yourself into a position where you can make better choices. And if ever there was an operation that did that, I think that this is that.
I mean, they've certainly seized the initiative, right? Ukraine's got the momentum now after 9 grueling months of that slow, painful attrition and watching the Russians bite off little pieces of Ukraine every day. We're now in a world where in 10 days, Ukraine has taken more ground than Russia took in the last year.
It's certainly, as you've said, you've covered. You said at one point, all of the above, right? In terms of things that they've done, they've definitely done that, and they have us asking what's next, which is also good. I do think on the long-term prospect of the war, I think one other big fact here, and you're going to hate this, you're going to hate me for saying it. I think that the United States and the European allies are more committed to not letting Ukraine lose than supporting Ukraine to win. And yes. I think that, and it's not that you hate me for that, I think we hate that idea. But I think that is the other big fact is there is absolutely a commitment to not letting Ukraine lose. I think France articulated that. And I think that's a big fact that Putin hasn't grasped. They're not going to let you win. If you start winning, they'll just give more stuff and eventually they'll come in over the border. They're willing to go that far, but you don't believe it, right? And so he's not acting as if he can't win. But at the same time, Ukraine can't do the things that would win themselves and put Putin into a bad way unless they get more stuff.
I mean, how much of that do you think is driven just by a fear among the established political class and diplomatic corps of a Russian collapse?
Well, it could be that. It could just be as simple as it is in the vital national interest of these nations to not let Ukraine lose. It is not so much in their interest to support it winning. Again, people are going to hate me for saying that, but that when you get down to realpolitik, it is just much more incentive to prevent them from losing. And so I think that it's that level. And then you can add in the fears of collapse, the fears of escalation, and that sort of thing that just add to that basic baseline of just core national interest.
It does make me crazy. It makes me crazy because it makes me feel like we lack the courage of our convictions. And in the face of this evil, to lack the courage of our convictions, that's not a world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where we do what's right simply because it's fucking right. I know that's not real.
Why would it be in their interest not to see Ukraine win? What I'm saying is that not having Ukraine lose is definitely in the interest. Going those further steps to help them win, which is more problematic, more expensive, more dangerous, because you do worry about a cornered Russia, is where you start moving away from where there's really strength of, and you say the courage of convictions, it's partly that. It's there isn't that much of a consensus to go that far. And that's, I think everyone here doesn't agree with that position. I certainly don't, but I think that's what's going on.
It's a political decision, right? It's the decision not to disturb the status quo. And the status quo is that, Russia is a large and important player on the geopolitical international scene who must be respected. And they are not, right? They're just not that anymore. But there is that entrenched notion that they are, and they have to be shown respect, and they have to have a place at the table because they're just that important. And changing that mindset for people, I think is going to be very, very difficult. Yeah, Graham, we are talking about appeasing the aggressors. There's a lot of people that want to do that. What would be the concern if Ukraine wins? It's looking increasingly like Russia will not use nukes. Well, I don't think Russia was ever going to use nukes. Do you, Dave?
I don't think so. I think they're forced to argue for it. And at some level they use nukes and it will be release the F-35s. And a lot of people in NATO have said that's it. Well, that'll be it. We'll come in conventionally because that will be going way over a line. And I think I've always said Russia needs to fear Western escalation more than we need to fear Russian, because we have so many things we can do. Like you're talking, we could just say, okay, ATACMS, have a good day. And it's freaking amazing that weapon works as well as it did, because that's a piece of crap weapon. That is an old technology. That is not a really it is the joint air standoff munition, the JASM you're talking about. That puppy's like stealthy. That is got all the zippity-doo stuff. The ATACMS is some crap they made when I was still in the Army, right? And I'm old as crap.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that it's doing so well, I'm just like, really? Our old stuff is working this well?
The casings on the cluster munition varieties, they pop off before they release the clusters, and they have a production date inside of them.
Yeah.
And we've seen production dates as old as 85 and 86.
Yep, that is a long time ago now. We might not think it sounds that old or that long, but that is a long time ago.
Isn't it though, man? Although It seems like yesterday.
And of course they have upgraded them. In my day, they were dumb. And you just launched them out, and you had to worry about like the wind direction and the humidity and all this at all the different altitudes. And now they've upgraded them with the GPS to make them guided, and that's what's made the MLRS and the HIMARS and all of this so much more accurate than in my day.
Mm-hmm. But just to go back to Hobo's question for a second, that was the question about. Why is it that we don't want Ukraine to win? And I don't think that it's that we don't want Ukraine to win. It's that we don't want Putin to lose, or at least we don't want him defeated. Because I think that a lot of folks, a lot of politicians, a lot of people in the political class are worried about what will happen to Russia if Putin is dethroned, and what kind of a power vacuum gets created in Russia. Will the Russian system be able to manage itself, or will it fall apart into clans of warlords, and the threat of loose nukes out there becomes a real thing again? That was the big concern, Dave, when the Soviet Union fell, right? We were worried that nukes would go missing and end up in the hands of apocalyptic states like Tehran.
And we talked Ukraine into giving up its nukes because, of course, Russia was going to guarantee its safety, and that worked out so well. And I do want to make it's not that
You
I think
know,
the U.S. would be happy to have Ukraine win. It's that the U.S. is not committed to funding them and supporting them to the level that would ensure their victory. We're not willing to go that extra level to triple the amount we're giving and to really do that. We're going to give them enough. We're going to give them enough to make sure they don't lose, maybe more. But I think that's where the level of support is. I think we'd be happy if they won, but we aren't going to take risks and put a lot of extra effort into getting them that way at the current moment. Maybe that'll change with the new political climate.
we are going to be happy when they win. And I want to extend right now on the subject of the Ukrainian win over Russia. I'd like to extend an invitation to everybody to a beach party in Crimea that I'll be throwing, because I am not leaving this country till I picnic on a beach in Crimea. I'll tell you right now.
I hope that happens.
Yeah, me too, brother. Me too. I did want to say, oh, shoot. Did I lose that thought now? It was a good thought too, Dave. You're going to be disappointed if I don't get it out.
I am.
Shoot. Somebody said something in the chat, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's a good point. And I totally lost it.
Was it one of the things you questioned me about earlier? Or, we haven't talked about other operations. Could they be going on? We haven't talked about the Russian Legion.
So this was a completely different thing that just came up in the moment. But the Russian Freedom Legion is an interesting idea. Does anybody know, I heard one rumor of the Russian Freedom Legions being involved in this just today. And that's the first time I've heard them mentioned. But it was not from a reliable source at all. Does anybody have any reliable evidence that the Russian Freedom Legion, the Siberian Brigades, or the Russian Volunteer Corps are active in Kursk?
There's been no mention of it that I could see. None. I honestly don't find it surprising. If I was the Ukrainian commander, I would want it to be all my guys. And those, because they're not part of, this is a big operation. And I think another big thing is the Ukrainian army is now a mature army. They've had 2 years of on-the-job training along with a lot of support. We now are seeing them at perhaps peak competence. And they've gone in and they've executed this operation, and they seem to be doing a good job, fairly big operation. And if I was Ukrainian commander, I wouldn't want forces that I wasn't completely in control of anywhere near it. Save them for later. Save them where they can do cross-border raids that will be distractions. Keep them in your back pocket. Use them to propaganda. Do things like you've talked about. Talking to the civilians, maybe recruiting from them. But that was my thought, is that, you're seeing a professional incursion here, and the Ukrainian commander is going to want it. Also, it just keeps it simple, right? It's us doing it. So I'm not actually that surprised. And but yeah, let them loose someplace else to completely confuse things when you need it. But they haven't needed it. They seem to have been doing just fine. And so you keep rolling.
So I agree with all that. I think that there were two things that I thought of. One is you don't want to confuse the two things. One is an invasion of a sovereign foreign nation. And the other is a civil action between Russians, right? Civil conflict. And you don't want to confuse those. Then the other thing that I thought was the Ukrainians probably knew who was guarding those trenches when they went into Kursk, that it was going to be a bunch of kids. And they likely understood or expected that they would take lots of prisoners. And so I'm wondering if this is an opportunity to put the Freedom of Russia Legion to work recruiting from the POWs, because we know they do that, right? every single cross-border incursion that they've done has swelled the ranks of the Freedom of Russia Legion, as I understand it. So I'm wondering if they're in the background talking to these kids, trying to determine which, if any of them, might be up for switching sides.
Yeah, quite possibly. As far as, the other thing is that question of, is there something else coming, right? Is this a distraction from some future thing? I don't want to I would love it if that was the case. I look at this and I'm like, Ukraine has held, they held the line in Donetsk, and they're still kind of edging back, and they've been hammered and they continue to be hammered. And they went through the shell shortage. And then you had the attack from Belgorod down towards Kyiv, and they redirected troops to that, no problem, and handled that. And then these magnificent bastards launched an incursion. And I'm looking at it, and people are like, oh, is this going to be an end run? And I'm sitting there going, Arch, isn't this enough? I'm kind of like I'm looking at Doctor Strange. What, you wanted more? So I guess, all joking aside, I'm not sure that they have excess forces to do that, right? Would be one thing that would, to my mind, mitigate against that. And as I mentioned to you when we were chatting, texting, Melitopol is the goal. Melitopol is on Vladimir's Zelensky's Amazon wish list now for a couple of years, and he, it's Robotny, Tokmak, Melitopol. You take Melitopol, you win the war. Yeah, you don't have to take Melitopol to win the war, but you take Melitopol, I'm pretty sure you're going to have your beach time. And but there's all those landmines, everything that stopped them last time. I don't know if it's still there, but at some point, somebody is working on a plan to go in that direction, and so I don't want to count them out. But I'm very impressed that they've been able to do what they've done. And when you add in resisting the incursion towards Kharkiv and then launching this thing, it really is the sign of a competent, mature military.
I just want to, Dave, Tony Takiri was just out in Konstantinivka, and he's saying that the curfew was changed 2 days ago out in the Donbass. Tony, what time was the curfew changed to, and what time was it changed from? Because we've seen, what we've seen, or what I've seen anyway, is curfew changes when things get more stable. The more stable things are, the shorter the curfew can be. And out there, you were just under mortar fire yesterday. I know that. And so I'm curious, and I don't know if he's still here or if he's still got a connection or whatever. All right, I'm not seeing a response from him. Anyway, listen, Dave, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning here, and this is generally when I end, from 5 p.m. to Donbass and Kharkiv from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. That's what it is now, huh? That's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. Okay. I was thinking about going anyway, it doesn't matter. So Dave, final thoughts? Anything? I really appreciate you coming on, pal. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you. And I've just honestly just wanted to talk to you. I've been watching you now for years. It's fun. And maybe sometime I'll have you on something, one of the podcasts or things I do. And again, we all thank you for just being there and bearing witness and doing what I think a lot of us wish we did, and maybe aren't stupid enough to do at some level, but
right? No, you're not. right? You guys aren't idiots,
But
right? You're
it's
safe and warm and dry
glorious.
at home.
It's glorious that you're doing it, I gotta say.
Well, thanks, pal. So, guys, I want to thank Dr. Dave Hayes for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. I want to thank the moderator team, the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk: Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, John Williams, Jay, and Travis. I want to thank Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group, Vanetta, who's got the Google Doc share, and the Dismantled Project 2025 group on Facebook, as well as Lars, who's got the Discord server and the Alexievich archive. Special thanks, of course, to Dr. David Hayes, who was not only our guest, but our sponsor tonight. Guys, I could not be here for you if you weren't all here for me, as you always are. And so I really appreciate it. I appreciated everybody. And it was great talking to you, Dave. Thanks for hanging out, pal.
Stay safe.
Thanks, man. Make it a great day, everybody.